introduce our speaker tonight. I watched his team last summer working on the museum in the 90-degree temperatures, 100% humidity, and they just worked diligently. We gave them ices every few hours to try to hydrate them and keep them a little bit cooler. One of them actually fainted from the heat. I mean, these guys work in extreme conditions. But you will see a lot of his handiwork throughout our two communities. He actually has things up and down the lakeshore, all the way up to Traverse City,
Holland and Manistee.
Holland, Manistee, Saugatuck, all those communities. Will be not here tonight in the pictures, but you will see his handiwork. He is an artist in his own right. He has been working in brickwork for at least 40 years, and it is my great privilege to introduce Dean Evans. Please help me welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening. Dean Evans, owner-operator of Morden Construction, and tonight we're going to touch base on some masonry restoration. And before we get started on that, I'm going to give you a little history of Morden Construction, where it came from, how it originated. And in 1965, a young man came down from Canada to the White Lake area and started this company from scratch. And it's a great pleasure to introduce Maxwell Lloyd Morden, and he's with us tonight. So for 42 years, Maxwell run this business in this community and established an incredible reputation. His integrity and professionalism of the jobs that he's done speaks for itself. And one of the great things that he's accomplished is, everybody's aware of Michigan Adventure. That entire place is sitting on a foundation that Max is responsible for. Yeah. I worked with him for several years on that entire park, and Max just did a fantastic job with that. And it's been an honor to take over after his legacy, and he passed the baton on to me to continue this business. And one other person in our business that's very important is our office manager, Malia Iverson, and she's sitting right next to Max. So if anybody calls our business, and that is the face behind the voice that you're going to talk to, and Malia takes care of everything in our office, and she's been doing that for off and on for over 20 years for Morden Construction. So she's an incredible person, and we're just lucky to have her too. So with that being said, I took over Max's business 18 years ago, and started doing concrete and masonry was his main primary focus in this area. And we started doing that, and then quite often we got a call for restoration. And a lot of times none of the other contractors wanted to take the challenge of fixing an old decrepit building that's fallen over. And for some reason, Morden Construction always came up for the challenge and pulled it off. So over the years we've switched from pretty much a commercial concrete and masonry company to specializing in masonry restoration. So tonight we're going to touch base on that. And in the White Lake community here, one of the biggest failures of the brick over the last 100 years, from the 1800s, is this guy right here. And everybody's probably familiar with it. It's called the Chicago Common brick. And this particular brick is, first of all, it's very absorbent. It's almost like a sponge. When this is dry, you could drop this in a bucket of water, and you'd be amazed on how much water that this absorbs. So the history behind this brick was manufactured in Chicago, hence its name. And the big freighter ships loaded their ballast up with these brick to balance out their empty ships in their trip up Lake Michigan along our lakeshore to stabilize their ships in inclement weather. So it was a brick for ballast, and then as they came up to our ports, they unloaded these brick all up and down the lakeshore and loaded up our white pine logs and hauled them back to Chicago. And then they shipped our logs from there all through the country. So that's the history behind the Chicago Common brick. And being that they're a very absorbent brick with water, they're very detrimental. The freeze-thaw cycle in Michigan has deteriorated them over the last 100 years. So in the 1800s, when they were brought up here, all the local business owners said, well, we have all these brick on our shoreline, let's build our buildings out of them. So at the time, it was a perfect fit for all of these brick. And then 100 years later, now they're starting to fail because of our freeze-thaw cycle. So that's pretty much the history behind the Chicago Common and where it come from. There's a lot of other manufacturers of brick in the area. There's also a Pentwater brick. There was a company up there that made bricks that was similar to the Chicago Common, but this one is most relevant in our community. So with that being said, I would like to go over some of the projects that Morton Construction has restored. And we're going to start on the east end of Whitehall on Colby Street and work our way to the west and then across the bridge into Montague here, so that everybody's familiar with where we're going with this. So restoring one building at a time. Here we go. Coming down Colby Street, everybody's familiar with home services. I actually did 2 different phases of restoration on this building. 6 or 7 years ago, we restored a lot of the brick and the joints above the sign there that were deteriorated, and that was just a common restoration for that. But just recently, the canopy here, the beam that was holding the brick up above that canopy started to fail. It's a very large beam that spans that entire canopy area, and years ago when it was built, they actually riveted with big rivets a steel plate on the bottom of that beam as a brick ledge to hold the brick up. Well, over time and years of rusting and water penetrating through that wall, all of the rivets in that brick ledge started to fail. So those particular bricks were really close to falling right out onto the sidewalk. So we were able to come in, remove all the brick, and we removed the plate on the underside of the beam, and this is the top of the beam where the existing brick continued. But on the bottom side of that, we called in a structural engineer to have him inspect the beam just to make sure that we didn't need to replace it, and overall the beam was still in good shape. So what we did at the base of that beam was welded a 6x6 angle iron the full length of that. And then the welding on that was specified by the engineer. He wanted a 4-inch fillet weld all the way along that beam every 1 foot. So there's 4-inch fillet welds all the way down to create the new brick ledge for that wall. And then after that, we used a membrane flashing to protect the brick ledge from future water, and then relayed the brick back in it. And you can see the different color in that brick. Our main goal is to replace that brick and make it look like it's not a patch. And that is the exact same brick that's onto that building, but the original ones have been weathered for 80, 90 years, and the new ones, you can tell, are a different shade. So we did the best we could with it, but our main goal is to match mortar color and brick color to make them look not noticeable. You can see the difference in the brick there. And if you notice, I think if if you notice, every 2 foot or so, there's a slot right here. I don't know if everybody can see that. What that is a weak vent. And that particular weak vent allows the moisture from the back of that steel out to the face. So we have a membrane flashing behind that. And any moisture that penetrates through that wall will fall down to that beam now, hit a membrane flashing, and then come out to the face of the brick instead of sit behind that and deteriorate the brick ledge. So that was a fix for that. And then that's just around the side. We did the canopy around the side with new steel and brick ledge on that too. So as we come down the road here, we have Pitkins, and it's probably 8 to 10 years ago, wasn't it, Ian, that we did the restoration? Yeah. So Don Nordland owns that building there, and the entire wall on this side, for some reason the mortar joints that were in that were all deteriorated, and the brick were actually in good shape. The brick held up. But apparently the contractor, the mix design that they were using for the mortar was a cement lime mixture, but apparently they didn't put enough lime in it, so it was a very soft mortar. You could actually take a jackknife and like scrape it out. It's real sandy. It didn't set up really tight. So the mortar joints were failing. In that particular wall, back from 1882, that particular wall, every single joint of every single brick on there, we ground to a depth of 3/4 of an inch. And then
every brick?
Every single brick joint on that entire wall. And then we tuck pointed. We actually use like cake decorating squirt bags. And we use the mortar that's designed for this application today, which is a much better application. It's a much stronger mortar. It also has some flex to it so that it doesn't crack. So we repaired every joint on that entire wall. There's the full length of it there. We took all the canopies down, and every single one of those was gone. And that took a few weeks. We were there for quite some time to replace that. And then this is the building right adjacent to it, or right across the street from the wall that we were just showing you. And this is the condition that wall was in when we started. This one here is ready for some love, we call it. We need to come in there and do some restoration on that. But we just use that for an example of what it looked like before and after. And see that particular crack up from the gas meters there? You can kind of get a picture orientation of where that's at. Years ago, the contractors never used control joints or expansion joints in their masonry. In today's standard, it's every 20 feet plus or minus 4 feet to have a expansion joint that has caulk in there that allows the brick to expand and contract without pulling all the joints apart. And it stops the stair-step cracking like the one that you see there. So today's technology pretty much remedies that type of cracking. And what we do when we come in there to restore that, we will take like the best spot that we could find, and we will cut a straight control joint right up through the center of that. And then we'll fix all of the joints in the brick on each side of it so that it appears to be a straight control joint. And then we use a caulk in there, an adhesive caulk, to give that brick room to expand and contract in the Michigan's freeze-thaw cycle that we have in our climate. So that's, and then right next to Pitkins is the annex building. And apparently, Pitkin Ice Cream Factory was from 1915 to 1959. Is Clarence, how's Clarence related to you, Ann?
That is my grandfather.
Your grandfather started that. Okay. Awesome. So this particular building, There's a hair shop in there now, but it was a lawyer's office when Ruth was running it before Ann took over. And Ruth hired us to replace the front facade. The brick were failing from this main limestone sill down. The brick were failing, so we removed that, and then we added a new brick facade to this, up to that stone. And that was the fix for the front of that building. And then all the way down the alley on the sides, there was a lot of the Chicago Common that were used. You can see the coloration of the brick in the alley there are similar to the ones on the table. And we did a lot of repairs on that also. A lot of times when we repair a building, you'll see like where there's an old window or a door, and there's always a different colored brick in there. And I've worked with several different historical societies that the owners wanted to remove that brick and fill it in so that it all looked the same and matched. And they always encouraged us to leave that different colored brick in there to show the history of that building. And the contractor back then wasn't in their, it wasn't important to them to match brick and brick colors, so they just used any brick they had to fill them in. So it really shows the history of when them doors and windows were there. Here's the top of the wall that had failed, and we put new bricks at the top portion of that. And you can see where the renovation was from here up, and those bricks were there. You can see some deterioration here that I believe we've fixed since then, but that was a few years back when we did that building. So there's right across the street from Pipkin's is the Fetch Brewing building, which was originally a state bank here in Whitehall. And Luann Schwartz was her name that purchased that building, decided to do a renovation on that. So she hired us to restore the front facade on that building. And we'll get in a little closer and I'll go over some of the repairs that we've done on that. This the front entrance here, every stone on that front entrance, see it from a distance, from the ground all the way up over the top, is new. I sat with the owner of Terry's Precast on the bench in front of there, and we drew shot drawings up of each one of those stones and replaced them all because they had all failed from the salt from the snowplows on our city streets. As that snowplow comes by, it'll throw that snow and the salt, and it kind of carries over it on the stone and the brick, and salt's very detrimental to concrete, brick, and stone. And a lot of times you'll see if you throw salt on the sidewalk out in front of your door, that concrete will start to deteriorate and pop up. And the salt is the main cause of that. So anyways, we had all brand new stones made and erected that back into this position, but we were able to save the State Bank original stone in the center of that. So that was really a historical piece to that building, and we did everything we could to keep that original, and we built all new all the way around it. Thank you. Yeah, it turned out very nice. So right here is the front of the building. Luann hired us to restore every joint on the front of this brick building, and it wasn't in the budget to do the entire wall down the other side. So here's a really good example of the joints that we've replaced, and here are the ones that originally what it looked like. You can see there's some voids in there. There's still mortar in there, but it's just recessed back, and it's not performing like it should. So I negotiated, and we got the entire front of it done, and we did a lot up top that was damaged. Like an entire parapet wall above was replaced. We repaired the tops of those chimneys that were caved in, so we got them back into good shape. So that building turned out very nice. The front facade was beautiful on it. We actually pulled all the planter boxes and I believe we put new stone sills in for the new windows up and down through there. So very nice. There's a sign, and it says State Bank, and there's a W in there, so Greg and I were trying to figure
Whitehall.
out. Well, for Whitehall State
Whitehall
Bank,
State
there we
Bank.
go, he's got it. Very good. Well, we were backing up a little bit down to the City Hall and the Police Department. I'm going to show you this time capsule. It's going to be opened in 2060. Approximately 15 years ago, I built this time capsule. And the city put all kinds of papers and all kinds of different things in there that's going to be open in 2060. And at the time that I built it, that looked brand new. And I'm using this as an example. That white stuff that you see on that brick is called efflorescence. And what that is salts and mineral deposits left on the face of that brick. And the cause of that is moisture. So whenever you see that on a brick wall, you know that you've got a water problem. There's water getting in behind that brick. What happens is it leaches out and dries to the face of that brick and leaves the deposits on the face. And if you went up there and tried to scratch it off, it's almost like a rock salt, but it's very strong. I mean, you can't even hardly get it off with a wire brush. And that's the deposits from the inside of that. And I'm using this for an example because when I built it, I asked the maintenance guy at the City Hall, I said, hey, could you redirect the irrigation so that it doesn't hit that? And he goes, oh yeah, I'll take care of that. Well, apparently 15 years later, he's never adjusted the sprinklers on that because that's exactly what water does to masonry in Michigan's freestyle cycle. So that was just an example. And I'm guessing before 2060, we're going to have to go back and maybe give that some love here pretty soon. So there's another picture on it. There's salt deposits and minerals out on the face. So that was just a good example of that. So right next to Fetch Brewery is the Colby Place. We were hired to do all new lintels above these upper windows. We put all new lintels and flashing above those and repaired all the damaged brick on those. So that was a quite extensive job on that. And then the two piers are in the front of that. We're deteriorating. Here's another example of the salt from the snowplow. It's only up about this high, and approximately 5-6 feet is where, when the snowplow comes by at 25-30 mile an hour, that snow and that salt will rise up and lands on that pier. Well, this particular type of stone, this limestone that those piers are made out of, was damaged from that salt. And the owner said, hey, could you fix these piers? And I'm like, if you see, it's a fluted pier. And it's a very difficult thing to recreate, to make it look nice. So I actually talked to the Terry's Precast and got a price to make brand new piers and just replace them out. And the owner opted to wait on that because it was fairly expensive to have those made. So that's why they're still like that today. So coming down the road, 123 West Colby, this particular building has a lot of history because there's so many different types of masonry on it. Originally, I feel that it was all Chicago common brick, like you see on the sides here. The entire building was like that, and then as it deteriorated over the years, the stone and the sills were added below to cover up the deteriorated brick. And then also this insert right here of the brown brick was added in at a later date and they created the openings for the new windows. And you can see the old archways above there that are preserved in time, so there's your time capsule history of that particular building. But we did a lot of the Chicago common brick above up toward the roof line and repaired all the damaged areas. I believe this pier right here, we did the entire upper, we brought that pier down to this area here. You can see that it's a shade different than the rest of it. So it's a menagerie of a lot of different masonry materials there. We got stone and 3 types of brick going on. Overall, it's a very solid building still today because of the maintenance that has been done on it. So this particular wall is in the alley of Pub 111. And this is typically what a wall looks like when we're called in to repair it. You can see the damage above. And then if you notice, there's a tile cap on this wall. And back in the 1800s, they started using these tile caps, and I brought one in here for example today. This is what they look like. So those tile caps are one of the biggest failures to masonry walls. And the reason why is that they laid those caps on top of the wall to seal the water out, and they used a mortar to seal between tiles as they lapped them over and brought them down through the top of the parapet walls. And being that that's such a long span of a solid clay, the mortar that was laid there, they expand and contract at a different rate. And they allow a small hairline crack between that mortar and that clay. And water slowly over the years had penetrated through all the tops of these clay tiles. So you can see the damage that was done from the water that's leached through those clay tiles and from Michigan's freeze-thaw cycle again. The bricks are deteriorated. So we do a lot of these particular types of walls. And after we remove that tile cap, remove all the damaged brick and mortar joints and replace those, I've created a good cure for that. And we typically will call a roofer back to have them run the membrane roofing up the back side of the parapet wall and out to the leading edge of the brick. So now the top of the wall has a roof membrane over the top of it to seal it up, to keep the moisture out. And then working with Historical Society, said, well, we want our tile caps back on this building. And a lot of times we'll get a picture of a building when it was built originally. And they hand that to me, and we want it to look just like that. So what we've done is after the roofing membrane it goes over the top of that wall to the leading edge, we reinstall the new caps on top of that. And I've designed a stainless steel anchor. It's like a Z-shaped anchor that holds that cap into place, and we put one screw in that anchor in the back side of it. And then we caulk that screw so that the water cannot penetrate it. And then the gap between all the tiles, instead of mortar, we use a adhesive sealant that's flexible. So now we've got 2 types of security insurance on the top of that brick wall. One is the tile caps that we've caulked back in, and 2 is the roofing membrane that's underneath that to protect that restored brick that we put on that. So that's just an example of we do a lot of buildings that look just like that when we get there. We'll take all the damaged stuff out and put all new back in.
So is the black mold?
Yeah, there was some of that from over the years of the moisture being in there. You think about it, if it can damage a brick like that, it's a very strong thing over the period of time. and then the water that went in a lot of times will fall down the brick cavity, the back side of the wall, and end up at the base of the wall. So a lot of that water was leached down to the bottom, and then, of course, freezing, it expands and contracts, and it pops those brick out. It's very detrimental to the masonry. So coming around the corner, we're heading back this way now. City of Whitehall hired us to restore this World War II monument last year, and 2 years ago, I guess it was. A lot of the mortar joints had failed on this also, but the brick were actually designed for Michigan's climate. There's a lot more clay in it, and it's a better winter brick. So the brick were in fantastic shape, but all of the mortar joints had to be ground and replaced. And this concrete patio in front of that, we've done a lot of concrete in the past. Max started all that stuff, so 6 years ago we kind of backed out of the concrete and we're concentrating more on restoration now. But anyways, the original front approach step going up to that monument was failing and cracked in several areas. So we removed that, and Brian Armstrong from the City of Whitehall said, hey, we really want this to look antique or historic. And he said, is there any way to make this concrete look like it's been here for 100 years? And I go, yeah, I think we can do that. So we formed this up, and we use an exposed aggregate to pour that back in there. And we use larger stones than typical. Typically you'd use like a 3/8 stone on exposed aggregate. We use like a 1-inch gravel for this. And then while it was still wet, we took a power washer and sprayed all the cream off of it so you can see the stones. So we made antique looking concrete, but it's brand new in the right location now, with no cracks in it. Then a few years back, Greg here did a lot of the wood repairs on this, the wooden part underneath all of the names on there. He was explaining that to me today, and the flashing and the wood from the moisture getting in and rotting that away. But we really brought that back to original condition. There's a good look at the antique concrete that we put in. So overall, it turned out really nice. We're back to original condition, and no cracks or leaks. Here's the back side. Well, here we go. We're heading down the road toward the bridge. This is another war monument, and this one covers a lot of different wars. Korean War, World War I, World War II. I think one of the pictures shows the rest of them that I forgot. But that stone on that monument, the stone was in fantastic condition. All of the joints on it were damaged. And the reason why is the very top of this monument, there wasn't a cap on it at the time. It was just stone all the way up over the top. And then over the years, the expansion and contraction, the density of the stone and the mortar joints separated and allowed moisture to come in from the top of it. So we got Grenada, Lebanon, Panama, Persian Gulf, Korea, World War I, World War II, and Vietnam. So that one's to represent all of those. So we ground every joint around every stone and replaced it on that monument. And then I was thinking, you know, in several years, this is the same thing's going to happen again. So I called Brian Armstrong from Whitehall again. I said, listen, I want to put a cap on this instead of having just the stone on the top. So again, we called Terry's Precast and had him made the stone, and we installed a cap on there. And typically, like a house, you'll have the cap of the rake runs away from the center. Well, this one's just the opposite. And I said, well, it looks kind of like a World War II fighter coming in. So that was our monument repair. dedicated to all the White Lake area who served our country. So it's a very important thing to have. And there's some of the mortar joints that we've repaired, every single one of them on that particular job. Turned out really nice. So we just came across the bridge now, and the first thing you see is Sawyer's Brewing Company, which is the old Ornberger building on the corner. The upper portion above the Sawyer's Brewing Company, we did a lot of grinding, tuck pointing, replacing joints, but that particular brick was in good shape yet, so we were able to preserve that. And all of the stone cap on top of that, the joints and the stone cap needed to be ground and replaced also to seal that back up, keep the moisture out. So 1930. It's a little bit newer than some of the ones we've done. So this was the old T-car garage, connected to the same building, Sawyer's, as you turn and go north on 31 there. And that particular brick wall on the front of that was failing. It was falling into the road. And eventually it would have. And the owner asked me what we could do about it. I said, well, we pretty much have to tear that down. So we took one width of brick off from that building. And after we demoed that brick off, we discovered that the footing that it was sitting on wasn't adequate to hold a brick wall. It was a very small footing. And over the years of all the cement trucks and the dump trucks and the semis driving past there on an inadequate footing, a little bit at a time, that vibration, that entire wall started working its way back into the road. And we caught it before that happened, removed it, removed the existing footing, and poured an adequate footing to build a new brick wall. So the owner there said, hey, listen, I really would like a lot of different colored brick on my building. And I'm like, well, you're welcome to come to our yard and look at the selection that we have. And when he got there, he's like, yeah, he says, I want you to take one skid of everything you got and mix them all up and put them on my building. I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. I said, well, it's going to look maybe a little different. And he's like, well, that's what I'm looking for. He goes, do I save money if I use the brick that you have in stock? I said, absolutely. He goes, that's what I want you to do. So that's why the different colors of brick and the different patterns, but overall it turned out really nice, and as you're driving by it looks very nice, and it fits the architecture of downtown Whitehall, Montague. And I'm ready for him to finish it with the windows and the new doors and the new sills on the wing walls for the door. I'm waiting for that call back to, when he sells enough beer, he'll probably get some new doors and windows in there.
What's the future use?
Pardon me?
What is the future use?
There were several different ideas of restaurants coming in there and having the brewery up above. And I'm not sure what they came to the conclusion. I know that he wanted to have a walkout restaurant below. Yeah, the social district. Yeah, so you can have drinks and walk out around there. And then eventually he wanted to have a patio on the roof of that with tables and chairs and umbrellas up there so you can sit up top with a new staircase going up there. But I can see that he hasn't done much progress since we've been there. So again, over those openings we put new steel in with flashing, and you can see right here this waffle looking thing is one of our wheat vents that allows that moisture out from the back of that wall. Here's a close-up of one of those little guys. Over every one of the pieces of steel with that membrane flashing, every 2 or 3 brick or so, you have to have a wheat vent to allow that moisture to come off the back, from the back of the cavity. So there's the side photo of that. It actually is very unique. It has its own look to it. Every time I drive by, I'm like, still not sure, but I like it. Yeah, it's very unique, has a lot of character. And you can see on top of the wall where he just took some of the caps that were originally there and placed them up there to see what they look like. And I give them a price when we come back to finish the stone sills for the windows. I said, well, I can put a new cap on the entire thing and seal that up for you. But I haven't got a call back for you. So we're waiting on that one. So across the street from Sawyer's is, this building's owned by Holly Hughes, I believe, unless she maybe sold it to Figs. I don't know if they're leasing it or what, but Figs Boutique is in here now. And we were hired maybe 6 years ago to go around that entire building. And it wasn't a complete restoration. We were only to fix the damaged areas and the damaged mortar joints. So we went around and removed all the damaged brick and ground all the damaged joints and replaced those. So we got that one sealed back up in good condition. Yeah.
Is that the Chicago brick?
That one is, yes. That's definitely Chicago Common on that one. And they have a really good roof system on that preserved that brick really well. A lot of the problems were around the window heads and the window sills on that one. And then at the base of the wall along the sidewalk up the hill there. It's actually a very unique and awesome building. I really like that building. Yeah, some of the piers, we did most of the brick on the pier replacement that were damaged. Okay, here's the alley behind downtown here. It's pretty much straight across Jimmy's Pub's right there. This is the backside of Jimmy's Pub. And that entire wall was Chicago Common all the way down to the end of the town here, and it was definitely deteriorated to the point where you have to remove one width of brick off that entire elevation. So we removed one width all the way down to the ground and poured a new footing. And laid, this is the Chicago Common remake. There's 3 different companies that make the Chicago Common remake that represents the old Chicago Common brick, but they've actually used different materials with more clay in it, so it's better designed for our climate and our environment. So we use that Chicago Common brick to put that back in on Jimmy's Pub there, the back side. There it is underneath the deck. And you can see we have the wheat vents at the bottom, and that's flashed now, so the moisture has a way out. And that's the Chicago Common remake. And if you see the color difference in them, you got the orange one, then there's some orange and yellow mix, and then yellow ones. Originally, the Chicago Commons came in 3 colors. There was orange, yellow, and tan. And a lot of times they mix those as they come off the boat yards. Different skids, they just built their buildings with them. So the remake tries to represent that of the different colors. There's our wheat line again. So this is across from the post office right here. It's probably 15, 16 years ago. It was a wrought iron fence right there all the way around. And the city manager asked me to give him a price to build walls and piers along there. So my son was a young man, but he was pretty handy with a computer. And him and I sat down, and he drew the blueprint for that on a computer CAD and printed it off for me. And being a bricklayer, it was really nice to have your young son so good with the IT portion of a computer. So he printed that off. We submitted it to City Hall, and they approved it, and we built this Montague streetscapes. And we used the same color brick as the post office across the street. And we put the sailboat signs back on that were on, it was actually on the wrought iron fence. That one looks like it could use some power washing. The stone caps need to be cleaned. Behind Meyer Well Drilling, that is a community dumpster enclosure for everybody in the alley. The city manager says, hey, what can we do? We want everybody to be able to use one dumpster instead of having 6 of them down here. I said, well, let's just build an enclosure, and then there's openings for everybody to come in from different directions for that. This was just last Monday. They have a new door going into the City Hall, and it's actually higher than the original. So there was a beam, an angle iron coming across at the bottom of this wood plate here, and we removed 2 courses of brick and put a new angle iron and flashed it in there. We just did that Monday, Tuesday of this week. There's the new angle. We saved some of the brick to lay it back in to create the bearing for the new angle. Been heading down Old Channel here, Ferry Memorial Church. It's probably 5 or 6 or 7 years ago we did a complete restoration on that. When I say complete, we went around the entire building and fixed everything that was damaged. And anytime I get asked to bid a project, I always try to rate that project from on a scale from 1 to 10. And 10 would be removing all of the brick and mortar joints and laying up a new brick wall. And a lot of times, like this church, there were several areas that were damaged, but not all of it was bad. So I come in at about a 5 or a 6 on restoration of this building. And we went around the entire thing and fixed every brick that was in bad shape and mortar joint. That's in between the new and the old church. And we had to scaffold that. It wasn't very much room in there. A lot of hand brick and mortar work in there. But that was where most of the damage was. We replaced most of those bricks you see above the arches and along the sides. The front entrance, there was a lot of deterioration on the arch around that and the piers on the sides. And we strategically support all the brick above and demo all the stuff that's bad and replace it. There was quite a lot on that elevation. We were there for a couple weeks. But overall, we've got everything tightened back up. The brick aren't deteriorated, and we got all the mortar joints back in good shape on the church. A lot of the stone below needed to be ground and replaced. The joints on that as well. And then we're moving a block and a half over to our Montague Museum. And that is one incredible picture. Very nice job on that. So we were lucky enough to be able to provide the city with a price to restore that building for the community last year. And I'd have to say it was a pleasure working on that project. And a lot of it had to do with the Lomans. When we got on the backside working in the heat, Cheryl made sure that we had a popsicle to stay cool at break time, and they were just such nice people to work with. So it's a beautiful building, and I'm very proud to be able to restore that. Here's an example of some, you can see where the brick were removed that were damaged. So it's not all of them, but we try to take the ones that are bad out and replace them. And sometimes it's easier just to tear the whole thing down and build a new one, but in this instance we were able to pick and choose and take the bad brick out of the wall. There's some of the crew. There's a pretty big area underneath that window with a bunch of bricks missing. There was a bunch of bad ones there, you can see. But a lot of times we use a lift like that instead of building scaffolding. It makes it a lot easier. There's one of our foremen named Bob Evans. He's actually a cousin of mine. His dad is named Bob Sr., and my dad's Dean Sr., so I'm Dean Jr. and he's Bob Jr., and we're cousins and we work together for Morgan Construction. We're a pretty good team because when he goes on vacation I cover him, and when I go on vacation he covers me. Let me back up a minute here. These particular windows are on the front of the church facing the road. The piers in between the windows were failing really bad. They were bowed out and it was ready to fall. And at first I thought, man, I said, we're going to have to possibly shore above the windows and tear all that out and relay those piers back into place. And I remember years ago I did some work in Grand Rapids, and they actually make a helical anchor that screws in through the brick into the backup material, and it anchors the brick to the backup. And in this case there's wood beams behind there that were very solid yet. So we put a plank up on the piers and wedged them and jacked them back into place. And then we used the helical anchors to hold it into place. And after that, we ground all the joints that were cracked because it was cracked from moving out and cracked from moving back. We ground out and replaced all those joints and tightened, and we were able to salvage those piers and those windows. So it was a very strategic project to be able to pull that off for those big windows. Here's some of the backside. If you notice the backside, there's several different types of brick on this backside also from all the different repairs over the years. Different contractors have been in there using different color brick. I don't know if we got any more of that back there. Tom and Cheryl get to look at that every morning when they wake up and have their coffee. There's some repairs on the street side. Yeah, the museum was a great project. We really loved working on that, bringing that back to original condition. The piers we fixed. Right here in this spot, you can see the roof valley, all of the water would create ice on there. And originally there was a bump out pier here. And it was a catch for all that water. And the ice over the years deteriorated all the brick on that pier. So we decided to remove the pier to clear for the water to be dispersed off the roof, and then just continue the brick in to make the wall straight. So we tried to cure that architectural design flaw. We went around the entire window. Every window and door on the entire place, we ended up caulking and sealing all of the edges up with the trim on the windows too. It's a very, very cool building. And, we loved going inside and looking at all the history of our community in there. So we brought her back to life, and it turned out very nice, I think. Here's a prime example of history in the past. You can see we have a troubled area right here where water would come down in the wintertime and create ice in that corner. And in the past, a different contractor came in and decided to use orange brick on there instead of the tan ones. And same below the two upper windows. Maybe a different contractor at that point. But it really shows the history of when that happened. So last but not least, this is the Mount Calvary Cemetery building. And I believe, I know there was a lady, we're going to look at the sign here in a minute to see her name. Okay. Ladies Cemetery Improvement. Miss Elizabeth Rowe donated the money in 1920 to build this. And this building was originally designed to hold our deceased community members through the winter months until spring when the ground would thaw and we could have a proper burial for them. And over the years it had 5 or 6 different coats of white paint put on it. And the city manager said, "Hey Dean, what can you do with this?" And I said, "Well, the only thing I can see, because a lot of the joints were cracked, the paint was cracked, there's deterioration on the block, and this is block, not brick on this." I said, "We're going to have to sandblast the entire building, and then I'll put a cementitious coating over the entire thing. And then if you want to paint it again after that, after all the repairs are done, you could, but it looks like they decided to keep it cementitious looking." So we went around this entire building and fixed that. So it's really a unique architecture on it. So yeah, that concludes the White Lake community area, the things that we've touched. We've been up and down the lake shore from Holland to probably Traverse City and over to Grand Rapids, and we've done several projects. And I just love restoring things and bringing them back to original condition. In the winter months when it's too cold to do brickwork, I restore old boats like Boston whalers and old trucks, classic trucks, and I just get a lot of satisfaction out of bringing something that has been deteriorated and bringing it back to original or even better than original condition. So that's the history of Morton construction, and it's been a pleasure talking to everybody tonight. If there's any questions, raise your hand. I'd be glad to answer anything that you might have.